What's up, everybody? I hope you're doing well. And I know I'm taking a really big risk today, but we're going to talk about the election. I know. But let's do it. I'm just going to say this part first to get it out of the way. Anytime anyone says anything at all about the election, even when they do everything in their reasonable power to be as inclusive and respectful as possible, there will always be someone who hears something as inflammatory. So if something feels inflammatory, just know it's not my intent to try to make you feel that way, but I know it's still going to happen. Do you know what I mean? I'm sorry, I'm not trying to step on anyone's toes. With that said, what I would like to talk about is how supporting our clients during the election has affected us as therapists. Obviously, that's going to affect everyone differently, but I think it's impacted all of us in our own ways and also impacts therapists in a unique way. Now, this episode is about how the election is affecting therapists, but as I said, someone's going to hear something as inflammatory, and before, there's sort of unproductive he said, she said things happening in the comments of this episode, I just want to say, I both deeply value people holding and expressing their opinions and views. That is an important part of, I think an important human right that we all have. But I also deeply value at the same time being able to be respectful of each other and find a way to move forward together, even when we have very different perspectives on a situation. And even if we really disagree with each other. So I'm just asking, do your best to be respectful. It doesn't mean that you can't speak your mind, but do so in a way that doesn't degrade the humanity of whoever else might be listening. So today's episode, I really wanted to just check in with you all and say, how are you doing after the election? How is it going supporting your clients who are processing the election while you are simultaneously processing the election? I know how it's affected me and some of my close therapist friends, and it's clearly affected all of us. So I thought I would ask you all to see what's going on with that. And if you want to hear more of my experience of how it's affected me specifically, I'll include more of that in the extended cut. But in today's episode, I'm going to focus mostly on your feedback of how it's impacted you. And in order to find some answers, I turned to Instagram. I dusted it off and cracked it open and put this poll out there. So I appreciate all of you who responded to this poll. I posted 3 questions in the poll. The first question was, what's been the hardest part of supporting your therapy clients post-election? The second question was, what's been the most positive part about supporting your therapy clients post-election? And the third question, how has it affected you to support your therapy clients while doing your own processing? Thank you so much to everyone who responded to this poll. As always, I will keep all responses anonymous, but it's not lost on me as I read through your responses. Well, first of all, they're not, I see your name, your username pop up. So they're, visible to me in that sense, but it's still a vulnerable thing to just type it out, send it over. So I really appreciate all of your responses. Okay, so let's dive into some of your responses for the first question. What's been the hardest part of supporting your therapy clients post-election? One person says, going through it myself at the same time. Ooh, yes. I think that one's probably true for a lot of us, that it was just sort of okay, I guess we're doing this. I guess we're doing this now. Whew. Some of these I see are just so weighty that I'm going to read them out loud, and I'm almost speechless. So I'll just read them and I won't necessarily share my reactions. Someone says, supporting rape survivors who felt they couldn't speak up and now they feel people never will. Someone else says, after my workday is done and I have to try to do self-care, I recommend all day. Someone else says, allowing them to say their piece. So that's kind of interesting. I think you can kind of catch too, for some of us, the hardest part was having to support people going through something hard when we were going through something hard. But it's also an interesting thing to imagine somebody else is going through something hard when maybe you're celebrating. Someone else says, general assumption that all therapists are liberal. That's an interesting thought. If we really just set aside the election and just wonder, amongst therapists in the US, what our representation is about maybe how we would tend to vote compared to the general US population. I kind of had assumed that maybe therapists generally represent how the US votes overall. I could be wrong. I don't know. There's probably a study on this. I did not look it up. So if you know the answer, feel free to leave a comment, but that is a curious thing. The next person says, client repeats lies that have been proven false about Trump, but knowing I can't discuss it with them. Yeah, I could totally see, like when we have clients who have a really different worldview than us, just hearing them process out loud and supporting them through it, it's difficult. It's a very difficult. So I hear that. Someone else says, one of my clients is worried about having children now, especially a girl. Someone else says, showing up for clients who voted against their own rights as well as mine. Yes, I mean, obviously the ones that I relate with, I relate. But if you didn't vote that way, then maybe you don't see it that way. But that's really painful. Someone else says the hardest part is sitting with folks who are in a precarious immigration status and fearing for their ability to stay. Whew, yeah, I mean, it's scary. And then this one's interesting because it feels like connected to me. Someone says the hardest part is it's been hard to see other therapists making posts that seem to encourage fear. That's interesting. I don't use social media except to the extent that YouTube is technically social media, but it's also a search engine. So I haven't really been exposed to what other therapists are saying out there on social media, but I could imagine that being the case. And that's maybe a question of like, if it's not helpful to encourage fear, but maybe fear is a reasonable reaction in this situation, what's a more helpful post to make that's based in reality? And you may not believe that there's reason to be afraid, but see how nuanced these things are? Okay. Someone else says, sometimes it feels like we, our field, fan flames instead of simply validate and hold space. Yeah. I mean, that's a question that's been coming up for me. Like, what is the role of therapists? Like whether it's we're meeting with our individual clients or we're posting on social media, or our role like as a profession, as like hopefully in an idealistic world, we can sort of model for everyone else, like, here's how to talk about politics in a healthy, safe way, in a way that validates our humanity, that validates our desire for forward movement, and also involves hard conversations, compromises, things like that. Like, can we model all of those things rather than just sort of lean into some of the unhealth that there's already plenty of that around? I don't know. I don't claim to have the answer, but I do feel quite strongly that the way we're doing it as a society isn't working. And I think there's a real opportunity for therapists to do it differently that at least like moves the needle in a better direction, even if it's not perfect. Someone else says, many of them are less upset than I am, and I am bothered by that. I mean, definitely there's a thread around like when your client has a really different perspective than you or voted differently than you. That's really hard to sit with. Someone else says, holding space for their big feelings while also deeply in processing my own. Yeah, so that's kind of almost the opposite. Like, I feel really similar to my client, but it's such big feelings, so it's like almost fanning the flames of my big feelings. Someone else says, instilling hope in clients when I'm having a hard time feeling hopeful about the future. Yeah, those last two feel sort of similar. Like, if as therapists, we're supposed to embody some sort of hope, hopefully some hope for our clients, and some sort of like stable strength. If anything throws us off our game, then it's much more difficult for us to be that for our clients. Here, someone else says, sharing in some of their fears. It makes the fear exponential for me. Now we're hearing something similar pop up again. I want to provide hope for them, and it's hard to do when I have similar fears. Someone else says, simply the fact that all of my clients are deeply affected, so every session has been intense. Yeah. Definitely. And here someone else says, danger feeling very ominous, yet so expected for a lot of them, especially a part of the trans community. Ooh, yes, I feel that. The assumption that I'm either upset with the results or overjoyed. That's really interesting. That one stands out to me, especially because I don't think I had clients make assumptions about me. I'm sure they make assumptions about me. They didn't state out loud assumptions about me and my perceptions of the election. So that's kind of interesting too, like what's the context where, I could see that coming out. I didn't experience that. Okay, so the next question I asked is, what's been the most positive part about supporting your therapy clients post-election? Here someone says, I suppose it's quite validating to hear others with similar views. Someone else says the most positive part was to let them know and understand their resiliency. And then again, someone else says, trying to remind them of our resiliency. And this is an interesting thought. Someone says, it reaffirms that I only have clients well suited for me to be useful for them. That's kind of an interesting framing. And I can only read into it and guess without actually knowing what's going on for this specific person. But that is an interesting question. Like, are the people on your caseload primarily aligned with you and how they vote? I don't know if that's what this person specifically meant when they said this, but that's the question that comes to mind. So that's interesting. And then like, how can we be useful to clients who vote differently than us? I'm sure we can. Another person says a positive was seeing folks get angry and want to take action. And someone else says grieving together. Someone says feeling like I'm actually helping in a time that feels helpless. Yeah, that's definitely one that I connect with a lot. Someone says connecting on a human level, most of my clients align in our responses. Kind of back to that idea of like, it feels good to have clients who maybe align with how you voted or that sort of thing. Someone says, I'm grateful they have a safe space to talk. Most of my clients don't feel supported in their beliefs. Someone else says, providing a safe space for clients to express disappointment. This is an interesting one. Someone says a positive of supporting their clients is seeing clients have more clarity on what matters to them because of the election and making a plan to do the good in the world they've been wanting to do. Yeah, it is kind of interesting. Like, sometimes things not going our way, I'm making an assumption about the phrasing of that last one, that those clients maybe felt like the election didn't go their way. Things not going our way can mobilize us to do things that are important to us. Someone else says a positive was hope and the goodness of people never dies. I wonder if it was hope in the goodness of people never dies. And someone else says giving hope to people who are being encouraged to be hopeless. That's an interesting phrasing. Being encouraged to be hopeless. I wonder what's going on with that dynamic. And someone else says to recognize our humanity and finding practical ways to build community and strength. And this last one I think is interesting. Someone says, I processed with my clients. It was actually really beneficial for me. When we're going through a shared experience as a society, as a culture, as a world, like, is it appropriate or even helpful, not just for us, obviously, but helpful for our clients too, to see like, oh, my therapist is also processing through this. And obviously that's something to be mindful of like, is this going to benefit my clients? Or, some clients might find that less helpful. Like, oh no, even my therapist doesn't know what to do or whatever. And maybe that might freak some clients out. But I know at least for me, anything that helps me see the humanity of my therapist just makes me feel more human. And the last question I was wondering about, which clearly some people already touched on in their earlier responses, was how has it affected you to support your therapy clients while doing your own processing? Here are some of the responses. It's been hard. I'm going through IVF and all of them also have fears of their reproductive rights. Ooh, yeah, it's hard when if you're personally dealing with something and then you're supporting your clients going through a similar thing. Like, it's really, really difficult. Someone else says, reminds me of last time and pandemic when nobody knew WTF was going to happen. Yeah, we've had some really chaotic elections, just in general. Someone says, it's been difficult to not allow my personal beliefs, feelings, and frustration come in session. And it even says something like, are we not allowed to let those beliefs come in? Obviously, in some situations, it wouldn't be appropriate. Are there some situations where it is? How do you sort of discern when it's going to be helpful for your clients? But certainly if it's for you and not for your client, it may still be difficult to do. Someone says, our shared values and beliefs made it easier to talk things through. And someone says, it got me out of my own head a little bit, which I needed. And someone says, it's been tough, but also helpful in sitting with others in collective grief. And someone else says, it's been meaningful, helpful, and heavy in turns. And here someone says, I'm thrilled, but I'm professional and keep it separate. And someone says, feeling helpless in helping clients' future concerns regarding Trump. And someone says, it's heavy and exhausting. I've needed extra self-care, hard to disconnect my own feelings. And here someone says, I've been surprised at my ability to support both types of voters. Yes, you got the chameleon effect down. As I read this one, it feels like it might touch on a little bit what I brought up at the beginning about how, it's really important to make sure we see what's really going on for somebody if they vote differently than us, right? It doesn't mean that we have no ability to have empathy or see how somebody might have arrived at a very different decision than us, even if we're really upset about that decision, even to say like, okay, I see how this made sense for this person to arrive at this decision while holding space for their goodness and their values and their humanity. I think that's a difficult skill to learn. I don't even know like how to teach that. Like, is there a way to teach that well when we're children so that we can like bring that with us? Because I don't think we're doing a good job teaching that, but I don't necessarily know how to address that. But that's something I think about a lot. And someone says, my state voted in a popular policy I disagree with, and I feel lonely in my disappointment. And someone says, after sessions, a weight is lifted off me knowing where we all stand, and I feel privileged and honored. That's really interesting. Without even knowing what they mean by where we all stand, there is, for this person, some connection, it sounds like. Whew. Well, I feel like I went on a roller coaster ride, but maybe that kind of represents, like, that's where we're at. Like, there's so many of us with such strong feelings, and people with medium feelings. Like, not everyone's going to have strong feelings. Also, not everyone voted. Like, there's a whole gamut of experiences, and we're going to have different experiences as therapists. Our clients are going to have different experiences from each other and from us, and sometimes more similar experiences. And it's kind of like, it just feels like a wild ride. And as much of a roller coaster ride as it's been for me, as maybe it's been for you as well, to go through all of those, I really just wanted to genuinely get a pulse of like, what's this been like for folks? And I do think as therapists, like when we're parallel processing with our clients, any like major events that are happening across an entire community or an entire nation or an entire world, things like that, it's always helpful to make sure we have like extra supports around us, because it can be a lot. But wherever you're at, in case you need to hear it, you're doing a good job. Thank you for supporting your clients through all the things, whether they notice that you're also a human, maybe going through all the things as well or not, whether they agree with you or not, whether you're having a hard time or not. You're doing a good job. And before we close, I'd like to thank TherapyNotes.com for sponsoring this video. TherapyNotes helps with all of your practice management needs, from scheduling to notes to billing. They have a HIPAA-secure telehealth platform included for free for all users, and so much more. If you'd like to check out TherapyNotes, you can get 2 months to try it for free with no commitment just by clicking the link in the description of this video. Thank you so much for joining me in this episode. Thank you again to all of you who submitted your responses, sending all my heart emojis your way, wherever you might be at with everything going on with the election and supporting your clients. And until next time, from one therapist to another, I wish you well.